Hello, welcome to a brief summary of Chapter 1 for Ethics Online, Philosophy 206. I'm the instructor, Julian Gonzalez, and my email is jgonzalez@kckcc.edu. My office phone is 913-288-7499 if you have any questions. So this will just be a quick overview of Chapter 1. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this. Quickly, we'll cover Code of the West, naturalism, the trolley problem, good and evil, and Nussbaum's idea that fiction can be used in philosophy. We'll also cover a few other ideas. So, Code of the West is the first idea that opens up the chapter. Essentially, Montana legislator adopts this as an official state code. It's based on James Owen's cowboy ethics. It's a 10-point set of rules to live by, such as courage and fairness, a counter to this view might be like, look, this is sort of, it's not really quite a law, it's more of just like a loose idea of tenets that we might follow in our state. But how do you this compare to sort of the moral idea, like, okay, how do I compare the Code of the West towards something like illegal file sharing, like a pirated movie or pirated music, something like that? Is this really sort of something that's going to prevent me from feeling guilt or something like that, or what my moral obligations are to paying copyright payments or something like that for art used or borrowed or copied? So I should say that moral issues are usually binary. There's an argument for, or there might be an argument against a particular action or a moral obligation. But there's also complexity to it. So there might be a gray area or a middle ground, so to speak, of what should be morally right or morally wrong. So there's 4 classic branches of philosophy, the first being metaphysics. These are questions about what reality truly is or consists of. There's ethics, questions what is the right way to live. And then there's logic. These are questions about the rules for proper thinking versus false thinking. And then there's finally epistemology, questions on what the mind can know. Now there's been more branches, sort of sub-branches, I'd just say, areas of philosophy within these 4 major branches. So something like ethics, there might be aesthetics, which is the philosophy of art, and philosophy of animal ethics, things like this nature. That would fit within ethics, but they're subcategories. So then, what is the difference between ethics and morality? So ethics is from the Greek ethos, meaning character, and then morality is from the Latin, meaning Latin, the word being mores. And then it means character or custom or habit. So morality refers to the moral rules we follow, the values that we have. So the moral rule we follow is thou shalt not kill. So ethics comes in, and this is theories about those rules. Ethics questions and justifies the rules we live by. So morality would be thou shalt not kill. The ethics would be sort of making an argument or questioning why is it the case that we do not kill, or that we believe thou shalt not kill should be a moral rule. So it's not enough to have moral rules, and we should be able to justify our viewpoints using ethical arguments. So Socratic method of ethics is one of the first ways in which we tried as humans to analyze ethics. So it's an elevated discussion of morals. It was academic, critical in examination, an exploration and justification of values. Something really novel and new. So it removes religious dogma and social rules pertaining to morals. So we don't use social rules. So Socrates was before Christ, so there was no thing as a Bible. Perhaps they used the Torah, which was the Jewish version. There might have been knowledge of that. But in his ancient Greek time, they're polytheistic. There was many gods to believe in. So his moral ideas sort of separated himself from those typical Greek gods. He was trying to think of things on a more personal level. So Socratic dialectic method has two components. The first is if you approach an issue rationally, other rational minds will be able to accept your conclusion. The second component is a useful approach is a conversation, a dialogue between people. So let's think about that. So it uses rationality, it uses the brain, it uses your analytical thought. Imagine trying to analyze a paper, trying to analyze a situation. It uses that part of your brain. But it's also a conversation, so you also want to have the ability to discuss things out, to have sort of things out in the open, and you want to have a conversation. It's not yelling, it's not being violent to make your point, it's strictly a conversation. It's not trolling on the internet either. So moral issues in religion. So one aspect of this is that there's a problem when talking about religion and values. For instance, it's a diverse world with diverse religion and a variety of moral and political views just within one community. Maybe that community is within a state. Maybe that state is within a country. Maybe that country is within a hemisphere. Things of this nature. There's just so much complex and diverse aspects of individual culture. So reason as a tool of ethics can be a bridge builder between believers, atheists, and agnostics. It should be stated that agnostics, they do not know if God exists, and for them it is impossible to know. Atheists, on the other hand, believe that there simply is no God. So moral issues and logic. A philosophical argument is not a heated discussion or yelling. Philosophical argument is more of persuasion, a communication method to persuade and to help people understand an individual's situation or where they're coming from mentally, logically. So basic principles of logic are these two parts. First, at least one premise or many premises. And the second is conclusion. You can almost think of it as a recipe. How do you make something like bacon and eggs? Well, you have to buy an egg, you have to buy some bacon, you have to crack an egg, you have to open the package of the bacon, you have to cook the bacon, you have to cook the egg, things of this nature. And then at the conclusion you have a breakfast, bacon and eggs. That would be the conclusion. But the recipe itself would be the premises. So, moral issues and logic continued. A conclusion is inductive if based on gathering of evidence. So, it's true that you're a student. I can verify this because I can see your enrollment, the classes you're enrolled. I can see your student ID. This is evidence gathering. So the conclusion is that you are in fact a student because I gathered evidence. Deductive arguments premises lead to a certain conclusion. So I'll say that a valid deductive argument's conclusion follows necessarily from premises. So let's look at this example. And remember, I want you to think of it as maybe like a recipe to bake a cake or something like that. So the first two parts of the recipe are this. All dogs are descendants of wolves. Fluffy is a dog. The conclusion, sort of the meal you just prepped, the logical meal you just prepped, is that therefore Fluffy is a descendant of wolves. So we know that all dogs are descendants of wolves is true. We know that Fluffy is in fact a dog, or input whatever pet you want. Therefore Fluffy is a descendant of wolves. This statement is valid deductive because inductive evidence would show that it would be true. So the statement is valid deductive. The conclusion follows necessarily from the premises. Fluffy is a descendant of wolves if and only if all dogs are descendants of wolves and Fluffy is a dog. You can almost even think of it as a math problem. 1 plus 2 equals 3. If you can see that. The first part is all dogs are descendants of wolves. The second part, Fluffy is a dog. Therefore, Fluffy is a descendant of wolves. Now this could be an inductive evidence if we gathered the evidence. Like we actually investigated what wolves are, we investigated what dogs are, we investigated what Fluffy is. So then there's this other version of argument. A sound deductive argument is an argument that is valid and whose premises are factually true. The first premise is all rabbits are mammals. The second premise is Bugs Bunny is a rabbit. The conclusion is Bugs Bunny is a mammal. Remember, this is an argument that is valid and whose premises are factually true. It's true that rabbits are mammals. It's true that Bugs Bunny is a rabbit. Therefore, Bugs Bunny is a mammal. So what is moral naturalism? The view that the theory values will not differ radically from culture to culture, since we all come equipped with a moral intuition hardwired from birth. So pretty much essentially, when we were born, we automatically have in us some sort of moral code that we can come to know. So let's say we're born and then we're put on an island by ourselves. We would still have the ability to gain a moral sense. There's a counter view though. The counterpoint, or a counter view, is that our value systems are exclusively, meaning that they're only a matter of social convention. So we only develop morality or moral tendencies or an idea of what is right and wrong from our society. So then we talked about the trolley problem. Essentially, you're driving a trolley, you're about to hit 5 people who are tied to a track. You notice too late, so you can't stop the train necessarily, but you could switch to another rail. But in this rail, there's a single person tied. So then you have the dilemma. Do you allow the trolley to go on and hit the 5? Or do you switch the rail and hit the 1? Another example would be that you're a bystander watching this all partake. Do you allow the train to hit the 5, or do you pull the switch and make the trolley go? As a bystander, you make the trolley go, hit the 1. We'll also discuss the Martha Nussbaum's love knowledge, and this has two important points. First point is that emotions can be morally relevant in moral discussions if they're reasonable. The second point is one of the best ways to investigate such moral emotions is to read fiction. So the first part, let me talk about emotions can be morally relevant in moral discussions if they're reasonable. So if you're overacting, being dramatic, maybe obsessive, or too aggressively upset, then it's not a reasonable emotion. But if you're being level-headed, but you have some emotion, that might be important to making a moral discussion. She argues that novels, stories, and dramas give moral emotional lessons. So as we read books, Catcher in the Rye, Great Gatsby, we're getting moral lessons. Schematic philosophers, you can think of it as professional philosophers, people who write philosophy textbooks. They lack a sort of particularity in the emotive appeal of good fiction writing. Again, academic philosophers' examples do not make the reader a participant. They don't know how to get into the reader's head emotionally, mentally speaking. Philosophers' examples set up the ethical result. So they're already sort of making you think a certain way in order to get a certain result from you. Rather, fiction, though, when you read a book, a fiction book or story, it's sort of a journey, and that gives you an ethical standpoint, the journey itself, how we got here. The last thing I'll say is about Philip Zimbardo's The Lucifer Effect text. So he was a psychologist that established the Stanford Prison Experiment in 1971. He got a lot of college students to be prisoners and another group to be prison guards, and they were just pretending, but somehow the prison guards started abusing the prisoners for real, literally. And in less than a week, they abandoned the project. So in his book, The Lucifer Effect, he draws a parallel between the Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq in 2003 and the experiment, essentially saying that under the right psychological circumstances, even peaceful people can be led to believe that extremely harsh and brutal behavior is appropriate. So that's the conclusion of the Chapter 1 summary. Thank you for your time.